The Economic Freedom Fighters is holding a political education workshop. The party says it has adopted the year of 2023 as the year of mass political education and voter registration. The EFF says all its provincial and regional heads of political education will be inducted on how to educate the 1 million members of the party and the broader society on the ideals of the EFF.
We are holding the political school of the EFF, which is basically a workshop to train all our political education officers from all the regions of South Africa and all the provinces. So we're empowering them to be our agents of change to spread political education about the politics of the EFF in the entirety of South Africa. We believe that political education is the lifeblood of the organization. We ascribe to what Thomas Sankara says, that without political education, you are basically producing potential criminals. So we want to have leaders of the EFF and activists of the EFF who are politically aware in terms of what the organization stands for, but also to have a proper appreciation of the kind of struggle that we are engaged in. So we've convened all the political education officers from the entire country to train them, to prepare them for the battles ahead, because that is what we live through. We cannot have an organization that does not train its own cadres in terms of a thorough understanding of what we stand for. And it's been so far so good. A majority, if not all of the participants have got a proper appreciation of the foundational documents and politics of the EFF, and we're doing very well thus far.
Well, this week, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula called the media briefing to address what he says are important political developments in the country. This was in reference to the Monday national shutdown organized by the EFF. Mbalula says South Africans refused to be used and bullied by the EFF and stayed away from what he termed the EFF's ill-advised protest. The EFF, however, has described Monday's protest as a success. The party was calling for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step down and an end to load shedding. Was the EFF march a success? Well, we discuss this now. We are joined via Zoom by political analyst Dr. Mechi Makgoba. Dr. Makgoba, thank you so much for your time. So in your words, how much of an impact would you say the EFF march has made, particularly if you look at the response by the security cluster and fundamentally the response by President Cyril Ramaphosa ahead of the march?
March has had a significant impact in the sense that the EFF has managed to set a national agenda in terms of discussions in the media, mainstream and social media. And I think that's important because some of these issues don't necessarily occupy a media agenda for more than 3 days. So there's been a systemic discussions in the media about wider important issues in South Africa. And I think from the EFF side, that's quite important. So since this organization is just a resistant movement, they don't have any sort of embedded political power in the state, one could say that the march has been disruptive by showing the weaknesses of the ANC, because now many people are asking today that the state has resources, and the manner in which they responded to the march means that if they are indeed, for instance, interested in ending crime in South Africa, they could respond to urgent issues such as crime and corruption in the manner which they discredited the EFF's protest. And I think the fact that the ANC, which has competing interest with the EFF, are kind of responding to the EFF, it shows that something significant happened, because many people on social media have been talking about it, and issues of load shedding have been centered around in the national discourse, issues of corruption. And I think that's where the march has been successful in terms of harnessing discursive power on social media and in the mainstream media.
And I mean, just to your point, should we as a country really be talking about how successful or not the EFF march, so-called shutdown was. I mean, isn't this an opportunity for government to look at some of the fundamental issues that have been raised, not only by the EFF, by the way, but by civil society? Because one looks at just the response that we've seen, as I said, from the security cluster, and a lot of people have said, if this is the way in which our security cluster can actually respond, to problems that could essentially derail the national order, surely they could be putting their resources and efforts in some of the things that are mentioned by society, crime levels, for instance, that have skyrocketed in this country.
Indeed, actually, to look at this march in terms of numbers is to limit it to numerics at the expense of social and cultural issues that have come into view and come into conversation. One of those issues is how should the government respond to the issues that have been raised by the EFF and other political parties and other institutions? And the ANC has kind of missed that opportunity, because now when you listen to Fikile Mbalula, it talks about the numbers, and the march cannot be limited to numbers. This was the opportunity by the government to say, we have had the issues that have been raised, and this is our government program in which we are going to respond to the issues, because the issues that have been raised by the protesters and the EFF and other organizations are kind of genuine national issues which cannot be dismissed as a flaw or as a misguided decision. These are issues that require the government to respond. And I think on the side of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula in particular, they've missed that opportunity to come with a more comprehensive response to the march, instead of using the neoliberal language of success, in which we reduce political and cultural issues just to numbers, whereas they actually have to be discussed in their institutional and social context.
Let's talk then about, just what this means, particularly for the EFF, if they had to sit back and reflect on what they have started. I mean, they garnered quite a number of support from other entities, including SAFTU, etc. If they had to, sit down and really look at this march in a very objective manner, what then does it mean, for their existence going forward, in as far as protests are concerned? Because, we're talking about these numbers, which is significant if you look at the history of the EFF and their reach in the past in terms of garnering these numbers. What does it say then to the EFF about, just some of the waning support that they may be getting from the rest of the country?
The issue here is to understand that the road is still very long. So South Africa has been mentally governed by the ratios and issues of non-racialism. And now it's kind of difficult to unite, more importantly, Black people around a national and collective cause. And if the EFF is to continue trying to unite Black people, they have to understand that this is going to be a difficult task, and energy is going to be needed in order for them to achieve any objective of uniting the underclass. And I think for them, that should be a lesson that they shouldn't take what they are doing for granted. It's a good starting point. And in the future, they have to know that they have a huge responsibility if indeed they are representing the interest of Black people, or generally the underclass. And the march has kind of given them that idea that there is a lot of work that is needed to be done in order to achieve any sort of collective national agenda.
Just looking then in terms of, the immediate future for the EFF, I don't know how much of the previous clip that you've seen, but it seems like the party, the EFF, is now embarking on its objective to educate the 1 million members of the party and, of course, the broader society on its ideals of the EFF. This, of course, happening ahead of the 2024 elections. How would you say, the party is faring to increase its membership and also to fundamentally seal its ideals?
I think that's a very important step, that of which relates to having a political school, because actually in the political arena, numbers have a significance if they are backed by an ideological inclination. So if you have a huge number of people in the party and they are not ideologically inclined, they don't necessarily understand the ideological underpinnings that direct the party, it's quite easy to lose such members or such people. So if now they are embarking on a cultural transformation process, which involves educating its membership about the politics of the country and the politics that govern the EFF, that is kind of important towards forming a foundation for the party, because in many movements, we lose an opportunity to build consciousness, because most of the time we're focusing on how many members we have, whereas the most important part of politics actually in this context is to make sure that your members have a certain dimension of political consciousness. And once you have inculcated that idea, then it's going to last forever, because you have left people with ideas that they can see that your ideas are quite strong, are reflective of the South African political scene, rather than giving people T-shirts or maybe food when you're going to campaign. That's kind of short term, and we've seen that has been happening more in South Africa, where people would be bussed to conferences or campaigns and they will be just given T-shirt. But when you want to reflect on what have they learned from this political party, you realize that there's no any other strong message beyond that having a political tie of a political organization.
Dr. Makgoba, thank you so much for your time and your analysis this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Political analyst there, Dr. Meji Makgoba. All right, we take a quick break. We'll be back straight after this. Don't go away.